Why does India's rise send shivers through the corridors of power across the world? Why are nations that once dictated the rules now watching carefully, even nervously, as India moves forward? These are not questions of curiosity alone. They are questions that define the future of global power. For decades, the story was simple. A handful of countries sat at the top, setting the agenda, deciding who mattered and who did not. But today, something unexpected is unfolding. India, once underestimated, is no longer willing to play in the shadows. It is stepping into the light with a force so undeniable that even the strongest nations cannot ignore it. This video will take you beyond the headlines. You will see why India's booming economy, its unstoppable population strength, and its technological breakthroughs are changing the balance of power. You will understand why its independent choices on global conflicts and energy trade make traditional superpowers deeply uncomfortable. But this is not just about politics or strategy. Hidden inside this story is a message for every individual watching right now. When you stay patient, when you build quietly, and when you rise with clarity, the world cannot help but notice. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover is not just the tale of one nation rising. It is a mirror of what happens when determination outlasts doubt and when silence transforms into power. This is history being rewritten before your eyes. There was a time when India's name was rarely spoken in the rooms where global power was decided. Meetings of influence were dominated by the same familiar voices, the West on one side, China on the other. India's presence was acknowledged, but not taken seriously. The narrative was that India was too chaotic, too divided, too slow to ever compete with the giants of the world. That old perception has quietly faded, and in its place, a new reality has begun to emerge. The shift didn't happen overnight. It was silent, steady, and often underestimated. While others played loud games of dominance, India was building from within. A nation once treated as a follower is now writing its own script. What unsettles the world is not only the rise itself, but the way it has happened, without bowing, without asking for permission, and without shouting for attention. This quiet confidence is what makes other powers uneasy. One of the most undeniable turning points in this story is population. For the first time in modern history, India has overtaken China to become the world's most populous country. At first glance, numbers may appear to be just statistics, but this shift carries weight far beyond charts and graphs. It means India now holds the largest workforce on the planet. Every global corporation looking to the future sees this potential. More workers mean more productivity, more innovation, and more energy driving the economy forward. But population is not only about workers, it is about consumers. A nation with over 1 billion people is a nation with over 1 billion dreams, demands, and choices. Every industry, from technology to fashion, from automobiles to entertainment, sees India as the market of the future. It is not just about selling products, it is about shaping trends, deciding what the next big thing will be. When a country of this size shifts its taste, the world economy feels it. For decades, China held this position. The world leaned on its factories, its markets, its massive population as the backbone of global growth. But today, with India stepping into this space, balance is changing. Investors are moving attention. Nations are recalculating strategies. The fear is not that India will copy China's path. The fear is that India will chart its own path, one that cannot be easily controlled or predicted. This massive population also carries a unique advantage. Unlike many advanced nations with aging societies, India's majority is young. Youth means energy, adaptability, and hunger for progress. It means a generation not tied to old systems but ready to build something new. When a country has more young people entering the workforce than old people leaving it, the economic engine runs faster, stronger, and longer. This demographic edge is something no other major power can claim right now. Yet, what makes this shift even more dramatic is the silence in which it unfolded. There were no bold announcements. There was no demand for recognition. India simply grew step by step until the numbers spoke louder than the doubts. By the time the world noticed, the population crown had already changed heads. This is why powerful nations are unsettled. Change that arrives without warning leaves little time to react. And here lies the deeper truth. When India's population growth is paired with its economic acceleration, the equation becomes unavoidable. A young, massive workforce plus a vast consumer market creates not just growth, but influence. Influence in setting global prices, in deciding technological trends, and in shaping cultural exports. That influence does not ask to be invited to the table, it demands it by sheer presence. The silent shift and the population factor are not two separate stories. They are connected pieces of the same transformation. Together, they explain why India is no longer a name that can be brushed aside. Instead of waiting for recognition, India has positioned itself at the center of global conversations. Nations that once ignored it now watch closely, not because they want to, but because they have no choice. Economic growth is not just about numbers. It is about the story. Those numbers tell. For years, the global economy has been shaped by the same handful of leaders, countries whose growth was taken as a given. But now, the spotlight is shifting. India has become the fastest growing major economy in the world. This acceleration is not a one-time spike. It is a pattern that has been building steadily. The more the world looks at the data, the clearer it becomes that India is rewriting what progress looks like in the 21st century. This pace unsettles countries that are used to sitting comfortably at the top. When growth rates in developed nations crawl at 1 or 2%, India's surge of 6, 7, and sometimes more feels like a warning bell. It signals a future where global markets will no longer be dominated by a small club of economies. Instead, India is entering the race as a serious competitor, and that reality is difficult for older powers to accept. Behind this acceleration lies a combination of factors that were once underestimated. Reforms in infrastructure, financial systems, and trade have created a foundation for rapid expansion. Foreign investors are pouring in because they see opportunity where others see risk. Domestic entrepreneurs are rising, creating industries that are not only serving India but reaching across the globe. Each of these layers feeds into the larger picture. A nation that was once dismissed as slow and bureaucratic is now leading in speed and scale. The economic story becomes even more striking when paired with technology. India is not only growing, it is innovating. The country has transformed into a digital powerhouse, surprising those who thought technology was the exclusive domain of Silicon Valley or East Asia. From mobile banking to government services, India has embraced digital transformation in a way few expected. Today, millions of transactions happen every second through India's digital payment systems. Rural villages, once disconnected, now access services and opportunities with a smartphone. This ability to scale technology across 1 billion people is what makes India different. Building a digital economy in a small country is one thing. Doing it in a country of this size is something else entirely. The world is watching because this experiment has succeeded. It shows that innovation does not need to follow Western models. It can be born in India, adapted to its challenges, and still stand as an example for others to follow. Space exploration is another example of this growing power. While many nations struggle with the massive costs of space missions, India has developed programs that achieve results at a fraction of the cost. When its spacecraft reached Mars, it shocked the world not only because of the achievement, but because of the price tag. It was cheaper than a Hollywood movie. These moments are not just symbolic victories. They signal that India can compete in fields once thought untouchable. The balance of technology is shifting. For decades, the assumption was that innovation came from the West and manufacturing came from the East. India is disrupting this model. It is proving that innovation and scale can grow together. Its digital public infrastructure is now being studied by countries worldwide, eager to replicate its success. When the world's biggest corporations see India not just as a market but as a partner in building new technologies, the balance of power tilts. What makes this even more unsettling for older powers is the independence of India's rise. It is not tied to one bloc or one alliance. The digital economy was built largely with domestic innovation, supported by global partnerships, but not controlled by them. The space missions were driven by local scientists and engineers with limited resources, but unlimited vision. This independence makes India harder to predict, harder to influence, and therefore more intimidating. The economic acceleration and the technology revolution are not isolated events. They are two sides of the same story, a nation building momentum, speed, and resilience all at once. While many countries are struggling to adapt to slowing growth, India is racing ahead with confidence. This new pace does not just challenge the old order, it forces it to adjust. And as technology becomes the backbone of global influence, India's success at scale ensures it will no longer stand in the background. Military power has always been one of the strongest signals of a nation's rise. For decades, India was seen as a regional force, important, but not decisive. That perception is changing fast. India is modernizing its military at a scale and speed that cannot be ignored. From advanced missile systems to homegrown fighter jets, from powerful naval fleets to cyber defense programs, India is building capabilities that shift the balance of power in Asia. What was once seen as a defensive posture is now evolving into a strategy of strength. The modernization is not about copying others. It is about building what fits India's needs. The army is being re-equipped with advanced weapons, night vision technology, and better mobility. The Air Force is acquiring state-of-the-art fighter aircraft, some developed in partnership with global powers, others designed at home. The Navy is expanding with aircraft carriers, submarines, and warships that project power far beyond its shores. Each step adds to India's credibility as a nation prepared not just to defend its borders but to influence the security of an entire region. This transformation unsettles many. For neighbors who once relied on India's slow pace to feel secure, the rapid changes create unease. For global powers who long dominated Asia's military balance, India's growth introduces a new factor they must calculate into every decision. It is not about replacing anyone, it is about making sure no one ignores India again. Geography strengthens this influence. India's position on the map is more than symbolic. It sits at the center of some of the most important trade routes in the world. The Indian Ocean is not just a body of water, it is a lifeline for global commerce. Billions of dollars worth of goods, including vital energy supplies, pass through its routes every single day. Whoever influences these waters holds leverage over the flow of trade itself. For centuries, control of seas has shaped empires. Today, the same logic applies. By strengthening its naval presence, India ensures that it cannot be sidelined in discussions about maritime security. Ports, shipping lanes, and choke points like the Strait of Malacca become critical in this equation. If you control or even influence these pathways, you hold silent power over nations far beyond your borders. India understands this reality and is quietly building the capacity to use it. This strategic location is both a gift and a responsibility. On one hand, it makes India indispensable. On the other, it draws attention and competition from other powers eager to dominate the same routes. The reason India's naval modernization is watched so closely is because it ties directly into this geography. A stronger Indian Navy means more control, more presence, and more say in how the world's goods move from one continent to another. But India's strategy is not just about weapons and ships. It is about partnerships and influence. Military exercises with nations across the globe signal cooperation, but they also show capability. When countries see India working with allies while independently building its own strength, the message is clear. India is positioning itself as a power that cannot be ignored, either in peace or in conflict. The quiet but firm approach is what unsettles many observers. Unlike some nations that announce their military ambitions loudly, India's actions are steady and calculated. Each step is deliberate, each investment made with long-term vision. The absence of noise makes the progress even more striking. By the time rivals or competitors realize the extent of the modernization, the change has already taken root. The military buildup and the strategic location are not separate forces. They are deeply connected. A modern military gives India the tools to secure its geography. The geography, in turn, amplifies the impact of the military. Together, they create a circle of influence that stretches across Asia and beyond. This is why India's rise is not just an economic or cultural story. It is also a story of power, projection, and presence. For nations used to dominating the seas or shaping the security of Asia, India's growing role feels like a challenge. It signals that the old order is fading and a new balance is emerging. The modernization of India's military, combined with its unmatched location, ensures that its voice will echo not only in regional debates, but in global ones. The shift is real, and the world is watching closely, whether it admits its unease or not. Independent foreign policy has become one of India's strongest tools of influence. In a world where many nations align themselves quickly with one bloc or another, India stands apart. It does not follow orders from the East, and it does not bow to pressure from the West. Instead, it takes its own path, choosing what benefits its people, rather than what pleases powerful allies. This refusal to take sides blindly unsettles global powers because it breaks the pattern they have relied on for decades. The most striking example is how India handles global conflicts. When tensions rise between world powers, many countries feel forced to declare loyalty. India does not. It weighs the situation, makes its own calculation, and chooses accordingly. This neutrality is not weakness. It is strength. It sends a message. India will not be manipulated into decisions that go against its national interest. For nations used to commanding support, this stance feels like defiance. This independence also appears in how India handles its alliances. It participates in global groups, attends summits, and signs agreements, but never loses sight of its own priorities. It works with the United States on technology and defense, while also maintaining close ties with Russia. It partners with Europe on climate initiatives, while deepening trade with Asia. This balance confuses many because it does not fit the usual script of loyalty and dependence. Yet it works. By refusing to be trapped in someone else's camp, India creates space for itself as a true global player. Energy is where this independence becomes most visible. In a world deeply divided over resources, India makes choices that suit its economy, not the demands of others. When oil prices soared and certain nations pressured buyers to avoid specific suppliers, India did the opposite. It purchased from the sources that offered the best deal, saving billions for its economy. This bold move showed confidence. It showed that India will not allow its energy security to be dictated by external politics. These decisions carry more weight than numbers. They demonstrate a mindset that unsettles both allies and rivals. For the West, India's refusal to follow their lead feels like a challenge to authority. For the East, India's independence signals that it will not become anyone's satellite. Both sides watch closely because India's choices shift balances in trade, energy, and diplomacy. The global stage is used to nations that are predictable, countries that align themselves and act accordingly. India breaks that mold. It plays multiple roles at once: a partner, a competitor, a mediator, and sometimes a critic. This unpredictability makes it harder for other powers to strategize around India. It forces them to treat India as an equal rather than an obedient ally. Energy security is not just about buying oil. It is about securing the lifeline of growth. India understands this deeply. By diversifying its energy sources, building new partnerships, and investing in renewables, it ensures that no single country or crisis can hold it hostage. This approach reflects maturity and vision. It tells the world that India will not be cornered no matter how strong the pressure. What makes this strategy even more unsettling is its success. When India chose cheaper oil sources despite criticism, its economy benefited. Inflation was managed, industries kept running, and citizens felt the relief. While critics pointed fingers, results silenced them. Other nations watching from the sidelines realized that India's confidence was not just symbolic, it was practical. Independent foreign policy and energy moves are two faces of the same strength. Both highlight a nation unwilling to compromise its future for short-term approval. Both prove that India values results over applause, and both remind the world that India is rising not by imitation, but by setting its own terms. This independence makes India's position unique. It does not fit neatly into categories created by old powers. It does not wait for instructions. It chooses, acts, and accepts the consequences with confidence. That confidence is what terrifies those who once controlled the narrative. They cannot predict India, and they cannot pressure it into submission. In global politics, that unpredictability is not just rare, it is powerful. Rising diplomacy has become one of the clearest signs of India's growing power. Once a participant in global events, India is now a host, a convener, and often the one setting the tone of conversations. Summits that once passed India by are now being held on its soil. World leaders gather in its cities not just to talk but to listen. This change shows that India is no longer on the margins of international politics. It is at the center of discussions that shape the future. Hosting global summits is not just about ceremonies. It is about influence. When India leads, the agenda shifts. Topics like climate change, digital inclusion, and sustainable growth reflect not only global needs, but India's priorities. These priorities echo far beyond its borders. Countries begin to see the world through India's lens, even if they do not admit it openly. That quiet shaping of dialogue is what marks true diplomatic strength. The louder voice of India can be heard in debates on security, economy, and development. At forums where once it struggled to be noticed, it now speaks with authority. When India makes a statement, it resonates because it represents the interests of a vast portion of humanity. Nations may disagree, but they cannot dismiss. This credibility is earned through consistency and independence, and it unsettles older powers who are not used to sharing the stage. Diplomatic rise is also about presence. India now participates in multiple groups across the spectrum: the G20, BRICS, the Quad, the United Nations councils. It plays different roles in each, sometimes aligning, sometimes challenging, but always asserting itself. This flexibility makes India a connector between diverse worlds. In a polarized global environment, that connector role makes it indispensable. It forces others to take India seriously, whether they like it or not. And perhaps most important is belief. Nations rise not only on resources, but on conviction. India's belief in its future, even when underestimated by others, created momentum that no external force could stop. That belief is visible now in its economy, its diplomacy, its culture, and its people. It proves that destiny bends not to doubt, but to determination. For individuals, this story carries a universal takeaway. Life often mirrors the struggles of nations. You may be underestimated, ignored, or dismissed. People may say you are too late, too weak, or too unprepared. But like India, if you hold patience, sharpen focus, and nurture belief, you can transform your position. Others may not see your progress at first. They may even laugh at your silence. Yet when the time comes, your rise will speak louder than words. The breaking of hierarchies is not just about global power, it is about personal growth. It reminds us that no position is permanent, no label final, no doubt absolute. The same way old powers now adjust to India's rise, the world around you will adjust to your growth when you stand firm. The fear others feel in politics mirrors the discomfort people feel when they see someone they underestimated succeed. India's rise shows that change comes to those who stay steady when ignored, resilient when doubted, and confident when tested. That lesson belongs not only to nations but to every person listening. It is proof that destiny is not inherited, it is built, and when you build it with patience, focus, and belief, no one, not even the strongest, can deny it. India's rise is not just an economic story. It is not only about skyscrapers, high-speed internet, or booming industries. What we are witnessing is a transformation that cuts through politics, technology, culture, and global strategy. For the first time in centuries, the balance of power is tilting toward a nation that was once dismissed, underestimated, or even ignored. That shift terrifies those who believed they would forever control the world's destiny. This is not about numbers on a chart. It is about the rewriting of global rules. India is proving that patience pays, that quiet strength speaks louder than borrowed power, and that independence and choices can unsettle even the mightiest of nations. The old world order, where dominance was concentrated in just a few hands, is beginning to fracture. In its place emerges a new reality, one where India stands tall, not as a follower, but as a leader. And here lies the deeper truth. India's journey is a message to all of us. Growth does not require permission. Respect is not given, it is earned. And true power is not in imitation, it is in shaping your own path. If this vision opened your eyes and gave you perspective on why the world feels uneasy, then stay with us as we continue to uncover such powerful shifts. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel because the story of change has only just begun and you won't want to miss what's coming next.